This is the Grand Canyon Hiker Dude Show, presented by hiKin. Hiking plus kinship. That's hiKin. Together we roam. Here's your host, my hubby, and co-founder of hiKin, Brian Special.
Thank you, Zena. Well, she is one of the most influential park rangers in the country, and she's in charge of everything that happens below the rim. Her name is Lisa Hendy. She spent 31 years in the National Park Service and has been stationed at some of the most iconic and demanding parks in the country: Yosemite, Yellowstone, Big Bend, Rocky Mountain, and right now, her second and final stint at the Grand Canyon. Lisa grew up in Tennessee, studied park and recreation management at Auburn, and got her start with a summer internship at Yosemite, which changed everything. Since, she's earned a master's degree, become a certified paramedic, led backcountry rescue teams, and in 2011 received the NPS's highest honor for rangers, the Harry Yount Award. She's also a trailblazer and an inspiration. Lisa was the first woman to serve as chief ranger at Great Smoky Mountains National Park, and today she holds one of the most critical roles in all of Grand Canyon National Park, Canyon District Ranger. A fancy title that means if it happens below the rim, whether on the corridor trails, the backcountry, or the river, from patrols to search and rescue to emergency response, she is in charge. A conversation on all things hiking and safety and beyond, including her take on the current closure of the river trail. Lisa Hendy on the Grand Canyon Hiker Dude Show, powered by hiKin. Hiking plus kinship, that is hiKin. You've seen, obviously, a lot over your career and at your time at the Grand Canyon, and I'm sure a lot that sticks with you. What I'm curious about is when a rescue call comes in, what are the mechanics behind that? What happens next all the way until the rescue is complete?
So it depends on how the call comes in, right? Generally, our calls will either they'll come in one of three ways. They'll come in direct call from the actual person who needs help. Sometimes by cell phone, sometimes on one of our emergency phones. Other times it'll come in by a third party calling to report that something's happened by any means, satellite phone, whatever. And then the third means is an inReach activation. And I use inReach to talk about all satellite activation devices. So I don't mean that as a plug for any one device. It's just the most easy way for us to speak about it. So those are generally the three ways. The first way, if they call themselves, then dispatch is going to get some very basic information, stuff like, okay, where are you? What's wrong? What's your name? And a callback number. That would be the most basic. They have to do that in case the call drops, right? And they want to know where you are and what's wrong. Like, those are the two most important things we want to get, especially from like a satellite phone that drops frequently. If we get that much, we can start rolling. All these calls will go to SAR shift, which is a daily ranger from the Canyon District who is assigned to be the shift for the day that answers SAR calls from the inner canyon. And so the call will get transferred at that point from our dispatch center to our SAR shift ranger. That person is responsible for being the incident commander for whatever incident has happened in the canyon that day. And then it's a matter of where they are and what's wrong. So determining those things, SAR shift will put together the appropriate response, whether that's aviation or water-based or whether we can just hike into them. If it comes in via an inReach activation, that's slightly different. It's really great when people just hit the emergency button. And I think sometimes people are hesitant to do it. But if you're in the bottom of the canyon and you need SAR shift and you want to talk to us, the best way to make it happen fast is to hit the emergency button. Even if you don't think it's a hair on fire emergency. Now, I'm not saying I want that to be taken lightly. It's not because, hey, I'm out of red Gatorade and I'd really rather have blue Gatorade. Can you help me? It's not like that. But if you have something that you're going to need help with, this is what this is for. You have to hit that emergency button. And you'll be texting back and forth with the SAR shift ranger. Now, it's important to understand that on your device, that's going to look like a separate text thread than the one with the IERCC, right? Because you punch the button, they're going to say, hey, we acknowledge that you hit this button. Great. And then you're going to get another message. And, if you're getting that from me, it's going to say, hi, Amy. Let's say Amy, somebody sent the message. I can see whose inReach it is. So if you send it from someone else's inReach, I'm going to pretend it's Amy because I don't know, right? I just see that this is who owns it. Hi, Amy. This is Ranger Lisa Hendy with National Park Service Search and Rescue. Can you tell me what's going on? And then that text thread will start. That's really nice because then we're talking directly to the folks on the ground. So we really appreciate that. That helps give us quality information. The flaw in it is, depending on where you are in the canyon, there might be a delay, right? If you're deep in a hole, there might be a 20 to 30 minute delay. Like you send a message, it's delayed, then I get it, then I send it back. That can happen. But quite frankly, it's the best we have because, prior to that, all we had was satellite phones that didn't work in the deep holes, right? The satellite communication emergency devices work fantastically well all over the canyon. Like they're just strikingly effective. And they give us really good coordinates. So they're far better than the satellite phones. In fact, most of my staff, when nobody's carrying a satellite phone anymore, and we've gotten rid of most of our phones, we're just using the inReaches at this point.
Like you said, not an endorsement for anything, but it sure does sound like the Garmin inReach is, almost required now in the canyon. I didn't know that it went to that depth. A lot of people, I think, look at inReach. It's like, mom and dad can keep track of where I am during my hike.
Yeah.
But man, this can be a life-saving connection because I assume a lot of times you ask people where they are, and if they don't have that device, it becomes, it's their first time in the canyon, they're not experienced in the canyon, they might not know where they are. So how much harder does that make to locate people?
Well, yeah, if we can't locate them, there's not much we can do for them, right? I mean, the canyon's massive, so we've got to know where they are. If it's a lost hiker that calls from, say, a satellite phone and they don't know where they are, they can generally give us an idea, or we can pull a backcountry permit and get an itinerary and guesstimate. There's ways we can, back in the day before the Garmin, we still had to respond, but what changed was how they got hold of us, right? So like way back in the day, it was a mirror flash, right? And sometimes it was people carrying a aviation radio that could get onto the aviation Mayday call channels that, the larger, it would hit like a Delta jet going into Los Angeles, and they would be like, oh, there's a beacon going off in the canyon, and it would give us a radius. But, that's way back in the day. And now it's sort of progressed to where we can pinpoint. The Garmin can be accurate within a couple meters. And so, that progression has happened. And what we're starting to see, although we haven't seen much of it yet, but it's coming, is some of the new Apple phones that are satellite enabled are also able at this point to do all the same things from the bottom of the canyon. And they're pretty effective. I'm not convinced they work everywhere. And I'll be honest, just our opinion, like it's easier to work with the interface Garmin has built right now than it is to work with Apple's interface when their devices are sending messages to us. And that just has to do with an Apple device will send a 911 text to our dispatch center. The dispatcher can't transfer that. So now Starshift has to go to dispatch, and they're going back and forth. It's a lot harder. There's still a middleman. It can't go straight to Starshift. So until that changes, it's still really nice to use the interfaces that Spot and Garmin and the other satellite devices are using. But the day is coming when I think the iPhones are going to be pretty effective down there. So I think where you were headed, Brian, in your next question is, okay, well, what then happens when Starshift gets that call, right? And again, that's going to depend on where they are and what's wrong.
So let's just say that it's someone who's having an issue. Let's just say at the bottom of the red and white switchbacks on South Kaibab, you get the call that it's a sprained ankle, a broken leg, it's a heat emergency. Does it matter what the emergency is in your assessment? I assume it does. But what happens on the rim? How do you decide? Do you figure out where the nearest ranger might be, the nearest Peace Corps volunteer? What happens?
All of those things. So again, it just depends on where and what's wrong. So you just listed 3 separate things, and they'd all be handled very differently, right? So and it would also matter how the call came in. So let's say you're at the bottom of the red and whites. Most likely, somebody ran down to tip off and picked up the emergency phone. That's probably how we know, because the cell phones don't work right there. And maybe you hit an inReach, and if you did, then we're going to ask you what's wrong, right, on the inReach when the back and forth text messaging comes back and forth. So one of those are the 2 ways we get hold of that. In that very specific scenario that you just gave me, bottom of the red and whites, it depends. If we have a ranger on the trail already that's headed that way, or even just a park employee, we're going to try to get somebody to them to get eyes on what's actually happening and really talk to them and evaluate the situation. Sprained ankle, a lot of times we can mitigate that by helping them wrap that and then get them down to the emergency phone at tip-off, and then we can actually talk to them and see how bad this really is. Is it just a light sprain that, if they rest and we can get that elevated and get some ibuprofen on board them, they'll be okay, they can make it out? Or is it, broken, in which case they can't move. Okay. So, and then there's the heat emergency. The heat emergency, again, depends on, are they conscious and alert? Are they able to walk at all? How bad is it, really? And those are all things we've got to suss out when we get that call. The response there is a wide range depending on that. If there's a ranger on the trail, again, we'll get them over there to get eyes on it. And then broken ankle, truly can't walk, probably going to end up being a short haul to get them off the bottom of the red and whites, because there's not a great landing zone right there. If they are able to get down to tip off, that's a lot safer for us, right? So if they're even a little gimpy, but they can limp themselves to tip off, we're going to really appreciate that, because easy landing, scoop them up, put them in the aircraft. And if they truly can't walk, that's how we would handle it, assuming that we can't help them mitigate it in some other means, right? Heat emergency, that spans a gamut, right? And I'll be honest with you, what people think is a heat emergency isn't always a heat emergency. And sometimes it's a real emergency and they don't call us in time, right? There's a real gamut of what heat emergency looks like, in air quotes there. So if they're conscious, alert, and mobile, we're going to encourage their friends with them to cool them off, and let's get them down to tip off. There's emergency caches in a lot of locations. Tip off is one of them. We can give them a combination to that. There's an emergency phone. We can actually talk to them. We can gauge how they're mentating. And there's a lot of equipment that's stashed there for this very reason, to help people self-rescue, right? It's like there's extra water, there's a means to cool them, there's different snacks and food and Gatorade, electrolytes, and ways to take care of them at that tipping point. So in that scenario, a lot of folks, they can self-rescue and they get themselves all to a place where they can hike again, and then they're able to get themselves out when it come nightfall or when it cools off. So it really, again, depends very heavily on exactly what's wrong and where are they. That's why it's really important for us to establish positive communication with folks. We really appreciate that. If they're way out in the canyon, we really appreciate that two-way communication via text. If they're at a place where we can't talk to them and they don't have a device like that, we're either going to try to put a ranger on scene, or we're going to ask them to try to get to one of the emergency phones so that we can get better information to help respond to them effectively.
Breaking canyon news, hike reports, and answers to all your questions. Find it all in our hiKin Grand Canyon Facebook group. Inside, you'll have access to Brian, Coach Arnie, and just about everyone you've ever heard on this show, all there in a safe, judgment-free space geared to root each other on and help you have your best possible Grand Canyon experience. The hiKin Grand Canyon Facebook group is the official group of the Grand Canyon Hiker Dude Show and is completely free to join. Just search for hiKin, HIKIN, Grand Canyon on Facebook, and join the conversation today.
If I gave you the opportunity to stand at the Bright Angel Trailhead, it's June. We're heading into the hottest time of the year, and I gave you the opportunity to stand there with a megaphone and to repeat over and over a 30-second to 1 minute spiel to those who you see heading down the Bright Angel Trail. What would you say?
That's funny. I do this at the steps of Phantom Ranch all the time.
Okay. It's already too late for people by then.
Yeah,
I know.
in a lot of cases. Well, the message is slightly different. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm curious what both messages would be, because one's going down and one's going up, and you got more experienced hikers, assuming they're more experienced hikers down to Phantom.
I wouldn't count on that. But yeah, so I think...
That's why I said assume.
Yeah.
Never know.
So I think if I was at the top and I could catch people before they left, I would tell them, very in all sincerity, there's two ways people really die in the canyon. They either overestimate themselves or they underestimate the canyon. That's what it is. One of those two things is usually happening. You're going to go down, and it is going to take you 2 to 3 times longer to come up, and that the temperature increase can be 30 degrees easily from top to bottom. So if you got that much information, that'll deter some of them. And then you say, look, here's the other thing. The water is critical, and you need to have enough, but you also have to have enough food to have enough energy to climb back out 5,000 feet all the way up. And there are going to be places where you're not going to have cell coverage. You're not going to be able to reach one of us effectively. And hiking between 10 and about 3 p.m. on the Bright Angel Trail can be deadly because of the heat. And it may be that you are unable to contact anyone in some of those locations if you succumb to the heat. So you could be alone in that heat without a way to contact anyone, especially if you're in a time of day when we've warned people not to hike, presumably there's not as many people on the trail because we'd like to think they were listening to us, you know? So in that window, not only is it exceptionally dangerous, but it's also a point in time when there should be fewer people out there to render any aid to you or to go get help for you if you're in a location where there's no assistance. So, you know, going into the canyon is supposed to be fun. It's supposed to be enjoyable. You're on vacation, right? And you have to get yourself back out. But suffering is completely optional. And we have provided endless PCR messaging, both at the trailhead and then along the way, to help folks make good, wise decisions as they're coming and going in the canyon. And if they will follow that advice, they can enjoy it and they can actually have an enjoyable experience, and they can come out and say, that was a life-changing experience. It was really amazing. Suffering all the way out, that's not fun for anybody, right? And you can prevent suffering. You don't have to suffer coming out of the canyon if you do the stuff we're asking you to do.
So what are you saying to people at the bottom who are on their way up and you're looking at them? And I assume you're assessing everyone just by what they look like and how prepared they look. So what are you saying to those people that are about to head up from Phantom?
Yeah, I'll be honest, to your point about assessing them. The ones who look like they're whipped, they don't scare me as much as the ones who are red in the face, but they're super cocky and they don't want to talk to me. Like, those are the ones that scare me, because they're the ones who are doing one of the two things that get you killed, you know, overestimating themselves or underestimating the canyon. The ones that sort of brush me off when I go by to talk to them and be like, you guys got enough water? You doing okay? The ones who are friendly and they're like, hey, yeah, we're doing fine. We got everything we need. I'm like, great. The one who's like, yep, I'm good. And like just super terse with me, and like, but I can tell, I'm like, this guy's he's not willing to hear a word I say. That arrogance is what's going to get that person killed.
People are actually like that with you?
Oh, they're like that all the time. Yeah. They blow off our volunteers. They blow off our rangers pretty regularly. I think they think we're trying to sandbag them, but I've scooped up enough bodies down there. We're not sandbagging you. We're serious. It's a scary place if you're not prepared for it. And then that third group that really looks whipped, I'm going to go figure out what's going on with them. And a lot of times those folks, they're excited to hear from you, and they're like, yeah, I don't feel so good. And it's like, okay, let's figure it out. And then you can, those people, we call it fluffing them up. You can fluff them up, and they're so grateful. And then they hike out after 3:00, and they're like, emails later, like, thank you so much. We had a great time. We're so glad we ran into you, right? The ones who will listen, we can usually make it a nicer experience for you if you'll listen to us. So.
Yeah, man. So the overestimating, I know, I hate to bag on the trail runners, but I know we're talking about trail runners in a lot of cases. But, to that point, how often are you treating people, or they become the rescue situations that you have to respond to, people who are actually experienced hikers or runners?
Oh, actually, most of the time. And I'll tell you what, it's kind of like, I'll give you a different analogy. When I was in Yosemite, it was the super experienced climbers. You didn't deal with them very often, but when you did, something really bad had happened, right? And that's kind of what happens with the super experienced runners, right? Like they get to a place where they get complacent, right? And in the climbing community, like that's when you start like tying the knot wrong because you got in a hurry and got distracted and you didn't focus or check it, right? Because you think, I've done this 1,000 times. I don't need to have my buddy check my harness, right? And in the same way, the super experienced folks, they think they can go lighter. They don't need a rain jacket. They don't need a headlamp. They don't need, or whatever, list your survival item, right? And those are the folks, like, we had that freak snowstorm back in April, and I had a guy, if he hadn't have been at Cedar Ridge, I'm pretty convinced he would have died. He was in his 20s, wearing shorts and running shoes, and it's snowing to beat the band, and he was soaking wet. And he got so chilled, he hit the bathrooms at Cedar Ridge, and he could barely talk. And his partner called us, and, I said, okay, here's the combination to the emergency cache. You need to strip naked, get inside one of the stalls of that bathroom, and get in one of those sleeping bags until I can get a ranger to you. Had he not been there where he could get out of that storm and where we had a cache, I don't think we could have gotten to him fast enough because he was that hypothermic, right? And it's like, look at the weather. Like, how did you not see that storm was predicted for 3 days, right? It's not like that was news. So I think that the super experienced folks, they try to go ultra light. and they're trying to make a time, and they're trying to beat some previous record, and they're not paying attention to things that can change. This is a wild place. Just because you've done it once, it's going to look totally different the next time you do it, right? It's going to be at a different temperature, different time of year, different weather conditions, different trail conditions, because our trails are constantly at a state of erosion, and they go into total disarray, and then our trail crews come through and fix them, and then you're going to see a different trail and a different section of trail every time because of just the nature of the canyon. And I think understanding that is really critical.
What's a sign that's a telltale sign that someone is in trouble or someone is on the cusp of being in trouble? When you just look at them, or you pass them, or you ask them a question, what's a sign to look out for?
Well, the mentation is huge, right? Are they acknowledging that I'm there, right? Do they just like look down at the ground and they're like, hey, and they don't even notice that it's actually a ranger that's talking to them? That's probably one of the biggest. And I'll usually stop and be like, you doing okay? And then try to get an actual answer out of them, and then see how they're mentating. Mentation's huge for us. Like, that's a big one. Mentation is an indicator of dehydration, hyperthermia, hypothermia, blood glucose, like all of it, right? So, and somebody who has one of those issues, if they're not mentating clearly, they're more likely to trip, fall, and break their leg, right? So there's like all kinds of things that go with that mentation. So that's what I'm looking at first. And that's my telltale sign, is that the first thing is if they don't make eye contact or they don't acknowledge me, and they're not wearing headphones, then I'm like, hey, you all right? And I'll try to actually engage them a little bit further than just saying hello. But I say hello to absolutely every single person on the trail, and it's because that's what I'm doing. It's a quick assessment, and I can tell a lot by just how they respond to a quick hello.
I'm curious about that. I think there's probably a lot of people, and I don't mean to digress here or divert off what we're talking about, but I'm fascinated by this. You're wearing the uniform right now. It's something, that you earned and worked your whole life for. And I'm curious the reactions that you get on the trail. You've already mentioned it a little bit, that some people don't want to hear anything. And I assume there are other people who look at you guys like the absolute rock stars that you are. And it's almost like you're celebrities below the rim. So what does wearing that uniform still mean to you today?
Oh, well, what it means to me is like, a lifetime of pride. This is the one of 8 national parks I've worked in, and it's my favorite. And, that's why I wanted to end up here at the back end of my career. It is, it's indicative of a workforce that is incredibly self-sacrificing and very willing to put themselves at risk for the greater good. And sometimes to a level that's at our detriment, and that's not necessarily good, but very self-sacrificing, very selfless group of people who care deeply, not just about the people here, but the resource and the canyon itself. They care very deeply for it. And I think I'm really proud, not just of, my staff, who I'm exceptionally proud of, but just what that means as an agency, and what we represent to the American people. I said in an interview one time that we have the best job in the world because we have the best mandate of all the federal agencies, and that is protect and preserve America's treasures, right? Like, it doesn't get much better than that. And as far as like giving you purpose when you get out in the morning, and helping people enjoy that is really critical, because the more people that enjoy it, the more support we get, and the more we're able to protect and preserve those places and those things.
Y'all are the best of us. There's no doubt about it. And everyone owes you a debt of gratitude. So when I hear things like people ignoring you or giving rangers grief for maybe a decision that NPS made at another level, and they take it out on you all, it's just, I hate to hear it. You guys are servants, and the public owes you a debt of gratitude. I want to talk a little bit.
Well, if I may, Brian, before we get to that, so I really want to hit on that, because it seems like this year has been especially bad for people abusing that star shift ranger who's trying to talk to them. So one of the messages I would really like to get across is that, first of all, being cruel to the person who's trying to help you really doesn't serve you at the end of the day. They're going to be professional, and they're going to continue to try to serve you. But we've gotten a lot of really abasing commentary from the public when we don't respond the way they think we should. These are professionals. They answer often somewhere between 5 and 15 calls for service every single day from the Inner Canyon. They are exceptionally good at triaging and figuring out the best possible response with the resources they have available. And that's an important note because we often have 3 to 4 medevacs running at once, as well as multiple ranger stations full of people who need assistance. And so with the resources we have, Starshift's job is to triage all the calls coming in, provide you with the best possible means to stabilize your personal situation, and then work to get resources to the ones that need it most. That's their job. And we've been taking a lot of abuse, whether that's via text message or phone calls. And it's been pretty harsh to watch. You're watching a field ranger, it's like my staff, and they will screenshot the messaging that's coming to them, and they'll send it to me. And it's just appalling how hard people are on them, screaming and yelling at them, cussing at them for not getting what they want, right? I want a mule out of here right now, right? And I'm like, well, you're just tired, man. Let's give you access to our cache. Let's feed you, get you some water, and rest until dark, and then come on out, But they don't want that. They're like, they want an emergent response to whatever it is. And it's pretty horrifying to see the abuse we're taking at this point. So I just really want to encourage folks to remember that their call is likely not the only call we're responding to. And the folks who they're talking to have hiked the canyon so many times that when you ask me how many times I've hiked up the Kaibab, I cannot tell you. I have no idea. Hundreds. They know exactly what rock you're standing next to if they've got your in-reach cords. They know what's happening with you. And so you need to trust them to help you, and be really careful what you say to them. They're going to respond well to you no matter what because they're professionals, but that takes a toll on folks. It really wears them down, and it's not fair. They're working really hard for you.
Well, I'm disgusted to hear that because I didn't know that it was to that level, and I cannot believe that there are people out there who would behave like that. So, we'll do our part, of course, to continue to spread the good word about what the Rangers are doing, and you guys don't deserve to be the brunt of anything. It's ridiculous. I don't even know what else to say to it. I'm just disgusted to hear it, and I personally, I think it's okay to not always agree with every decision that NPS makes. NPS is a government entity, and they need accountability. The Rangers are just out there executing on the decisions that are made at the top, and I do have to shift gears and ask you something about something right now that really is top of mind for just about everyone in the Canyon community, and that's the river trail closure, of course, and cutting off access to Bright Angel. I think that caught a lot in the community off guard when that decision was made to cut off access to Bright Angel for the entirety just about of rim-to-rim season and forcing people up South Kaibab. I've been on record as speaking about this and wondering about the decision that was made and how that decision could have been made, because I think it's an issue of public safety. But I'm curious, just from where you stand, do you feel like that decision-making process, when that decision was made, included enough input from the boots on the ground, like you, the people who make the decisions? And I'm just curious what your take on what that decision ultimately means.
Well, I'll say that I was allowed to give input. Now, so I'm the district ranger, so I oversee emergency response and Starshift within the Inner Canyon and the rangers that work in the Inner Canyon and the river. And I was asked what I thought, and I was allowed to give that input. So I want to just, as far as the first part of your question, were we able to give that input? Absolutely. And I took input from all of my personnel and funneled it up as well.
Can you tell us what that input was?
From the very beginning of the construction, the input was we really should not close the Bright Angel Trail between, rim to rim season essentially through the whole summer, the summer being a big deal, right? I realize a lot of your listeners are rim to rimmers, but, it's not just that season, right? It's the bulk of summer when the heat's on. And we really didn't want to. And that conversation took place as far back as like 2022 when I first got back here from the last park I was at. So, and for the last 2 years, they have managed to keep the trail open in spite of the construction. And some things have delayed the construction. Now, keep in mind, I want to take a couple seconds and emphasize this pipeline project has to happen. If you want to bring your grandchildren to Grand Canyon, you got to have water. The South Rim only has water and hotels and restaurants and places for you to visit. because the water is coming across the canyon in that pipeline.
No question.
And so everyone, even if you never hike in the canyon, you got to have that pipeline. It's got to get built. And some things have delayed it. I was one of the 2 rangers who found the archaeological site at the Delta that delayed construction for quite some time. And so every one of those delays has pushed the construction timeline back. And the need to get the pipeline done within a time frame has to do a lot with cost. And just imagine you've hired hundreds of workers, they're all on a contract, and you've rented millions of dollars worth of trailers for them to live in, bathrooms, everything else, so that every single day it's costing you X amount to just have the rental equipment and the helicopters and everything on standby to do the construction, right? Every delay that pushes that back further, you still have all that equipment, you have that cost. If the delay is caused by the park will pay the contractor back for some of those costs. And so that expenditure, the park can't afford that for on and on and on, months and months and months of delay. And so we were faced with a situation where the pipeline has to get built. And while we did our best the last 2 years not to affect a closure like that, it came down to, we really have to prioritize getting this pipeline finished. So then how do we mitigate the impact to the visitors the very best we can? And so the closure that you see is the one that management, in coordination with the project managers for the pipeline, determined was the best solution to allow the construction to move forward, to allow the visitors access as much as possible so you can still go all the way to the river on the Bright Angel. You just can't get across to Phantom. So what they wanted was to still provide people the Bright Angel as a safer, I'm not going to tell you it's a safe means in the summer, but a safer means to go to the river and to come back up. And if you still have access to Phantom, if you want to get there, you got to go down the Kaibab. And there is a way to connect the 2 trails across the Tonto. Like every trail in the canyon, there is a time of year when it is not safe to do it. And while the options exist on all of those trails at all different times of year, it doesn't mean that just because the option exists to take the trail, that it's a safe time to do it, or that it is a safe trail for you and your abilities to do it. There's times of day that make it more variable, and there's times of year. And so the park's job is to provide the visitor access to as much of the park as possible in the midst of the construction. How to do that safely? We provide you with as much information as we possibly can to do that. I'll be honest with you, we went to Herculean effort to put out really quality safety messaging prior to last weekend with every single junction along, like the junction on the Tonto on both sides at tip off and at Havasupai by Garden. Super safe. Like, here's how you could do this safely. Please don't do it between these hours. Here's what you need to be safe from this point where you are standing right now. And people ignored it. And we medevaced a few folks who flat told us they ignored the sign. We had one guy come out, go to the clinic, get diagnosed with rhabdo, end up in the hospital, and write us to say, I'm so sorry, 2 rangers told me so, and I did it anyway. So we're doing our best to help people have access to the park and to access it safely. And at some point, they got to meet us halfway and do what we're asking, right? We're also trying to provide millions of people who will never drop below the rim access to the canyon via water and lodging and places to be up here. So again, the park's doing its job. We're providing access and we're providing for future access, but it's up to the public to help us figure out how to do that safely, right? And we're giving them all the messaging we know to give them on how to do it.
Yeah, I mean, their self-responsibility is a huge part of taking on a hike like a north to south, rim to rim, especially this season. But I mean, there has to be concern, because if someone like me has concern about it and you have forgotten more about the canyon than I'll ever know, but there has to be some kind of concern between you and your staff about the fact that we're just getting into the heat of summer and we're forcing people up South Kaibab, which is exposed, which is waterless, which is steep, which is just an incredibly dangerous exit point in the canyon. We advise people that the only safe way to do it this summer is to stay at the bottom, hang out until the sun essentially goes down, and then start up. And you're just going to have to hike out in the dark. But that's the only relatively safe way to do it on a typical summer day in the Grand Canyon. But is there, especially based on what we've seen so far with all the rescues, there's got to be a real sense of fear among everyone who you work with about what this summer could be like at the end.
Well, sir, what I would say is no one is forcing anyone to go up the South Kaibab, right? I want to start right there. People are making a choice to go into the canyon, and they're making a choice to choose this trail and come up the Kaibab at this time of year and at whatever time of day they choose to do it. I think your messaging sounds fantastic, right? I mean, keep in mind, thousands of people are hiking that trail, and they're doing just fine, right? If you think about how many people hike that trail annually, it's thousands. And we medevac a fraction. We medevac about 350 people park-wide every year, okay? Now, unfortunately, some of the folks, it becomes a very critical life-ending or life-threatening situation. But as a percentage of the people that are hiking, it's a small percentage. And what I would say is if our rangers are hiking in and out of there, if it was like so terrifying to hike in and out of there, we wouldn't do it, right? I'm not going to put my staff at risk, but we hike in and out of there all the time. And we're able to do it because we're doing the things that we're telling the public to do. So a couple of the things that's really critical is self-cooling. So when they get to Phantom, they've got to get all the way cooled off before they come back out. There's a lot of people trying to go rim to river and back on the Kaibab. That's not an ideal scenario, right? But they just want to see Phantom. Okay, then start at midnight, get down there in the dark, enjoy Phantom when it lightens up, because it lightens up between 4:30 and 5 before the equinox, right? Like it's really light really early. Get super cooled off, get really wet, and walk back out before the heat of the day, right? Like when I leave Phantom, I leave at 3 and 4 in the morning. You know, at this time of year, I'm out by 7:38, and that's with talking to everybody, and everybody's fine, right? Go have breakfast at the Altavar. Enjoy your day. So nobody's forcing anyone to hike out at 2 in the afternoon from Phantom. Like that's a choice people are making. So is there fear among our staff? And I'd say our staff are very concerned because they know people won't do what we're telling them, And so, yeah, we're concerned for the public, but we're not concerned because the trail's closed. We're concerned because we know they won't follow the advice we're giving them. There is signage all over the canyon. There is signage for the folks who made it to tip off, and now they're like, gosh, I think we screwed up. We ignored the sign at the trailhead. Now what do we do? There's a couple signs down there that are directed at those people. You messed up. We get it. It's okay. People mess up. Here's what you do now, right? Like we've put all of that out, and yet we're still having people blow by those and get in trouble because they're not doing what we're asking, And I think you're really experienced folks that, a lot of your listeners, they get that, right? Like I'm seeing those runners in the dark with headlamps, in the winter and in the summer. When I'm coming up at 3 a.m, they're down in the red and whites, and that's where I meet them. And I know they started super early. I'm like, good on them. Like they get it, right? So the thousands of people who are doing the right thing and are following all the safety messaging, they're coming in and out of the canyon fine. Where our fear lies is the folks who aren't doing those things.
Yeah, self-responsibility, self-accountability. It can be a thing these days that people don't always take to heart.
Celebrate your Grand Canyon adventures with our unique line of tees, hoodies, and more at hiKin.club. From rim to rim to Victor Vomit, you're sure to find something to satisfy your Grand Canyon obsession. That's at hiKin.club. hiKin. Together we roam.
I feel like the human nature is for a lot of people that have these trips planned and are coming in the summer that, you know what, I'll just deal with it when I get there. How bad could it be, Mm-hmm. Well, the canyon can be really bad. And I know that you have a master's in biomechanics and exercise physiology, so you understand how heat affects the body. And I'm curious because you hear people all the time who might be doing, I'm going to do a rim to rim to rim in July. But I live in Dallas or I live in Houston. I'm used to the heat, so I'll be fine. And have you hiked the canyon before? No, but I'll be fine. What do you say to people like that? Is that a thing? I know heat adaptation, you can get better at it. I understand that. But what would you say to someone who's never hiked the canyon before, but they're coming to do it in the middle of summer, about how their body might or might not react to the heat?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think there's a few things even beyond the heat to think about. So one is elevation, right? If you're coming from Dallas, that's not a pretty high elevation, right? And you're going to go from 7,000 feet across the canyon up to 8,000 something, and then you're going to come back, right? And I think that's a big piece of it, right? My experience in Texas is it's pretty humid in Dallas, and there's not the humidity here. And one of the things to remember as well is that in order for your body to intake super dry air, it has to moisten it. Otherwise, your lungs would just become a sticky ball of goo, right? So you expend some of the moisture in your system on every breath. So now add that to you're breathing harder because you're at elevation, okay? And now you're losing that much more water with every single breath. And so the dehydration component is huge, even without the heat, right? So that's just elevation and dry air. So then add the heat, okay? I think I'd ask people to be honest with themselves. So just because you're from Dallas, right, or Phoenix, does that mean that you travel from your air-conditioned house to your air-conditioned car to your air-conditioned office to your air-conditioned gym to train and then back? Or are you actually working in the heat? Are you going for your run at 4 a.m. because you know darn well that's the best time to go because it's super hot later? Or are you training in small increments to go for your run at a hotter time of day so that you can get ready for that heat, right? So those are some things that I would warn people. Like, that's part of that underestimation of the canyon itself. And then comorbidities. And I just want to say, folks who have any kind of electrolyte considerations, underlying kidney disease, diabetes, cardiac conditions, all of those can be exacerbated grossly on a hike like this. Not just because you're making your heart work harder, but because you can get electrolyte imbalances that cause dysrhythmias. And so any kind of precondition for a cardiac event can be exacerbated by that heat, even if you have a super strong heart, right? Even if your doctor says you fully recovered from that bypass, whatever that is, right? And you're now running marathons. If your electrolytes get out of whack, you could be more susceptible to problems. And the same is true, anybody who has any kind of kidney dysfunction understands, and that includes diabetics, that that predisposes them to some sort of electrolyte considerations. And so that can be something that may be exacerbated on a level that you didn't expect. And then there are other medications out there, and it's worth asking your doctor, that can cause you problems adapting to elevation. And then there are other medications that can affect your electrolytes that you may not have thought about, right? That ever affected your electrolytes. So I would really recommend, if you're taking any kind of prescription medication, is just run that by your doc. Like, hey, I'm going to be in super high temps and I'm going to be exerting at elevation, and see if they have any underlying information for you about how those medications might affect your ability to adapt in those situations. And then it doesn't mean you can't do it. It just means you may have to take some precautions to address those adaptations. So those are the things I would say to the average person. There's more to it than just, hey, I'm just going to roll out and go do this hike. The heat itself, one of the scariest and most insidious things about it is that once you start getting past a tipping point of heat, what does heat do? You've watched an egg fry, it denatures proteins, right? And it'll denature the proteins in your brain, and you're not thinking straight. And so your decision making is grossly impaired. And so people will get to a tipping point where not only are they in trouble from the heat, from their body heat reaching an excessive level, but they can't even mentate to the degree that they can now do a good job of mitigating it, of saying, I am too hot, I need to change direction and do something different. They may not even be able to make that decision for themselves. We've had horrific stories of people that literally are hiking until they drop. Like, I have unfortunately recovered bodies with cactus spines stuck in their faces where they literally just fell into a cactus and died. Like, it just, bam, just that fast. And it was because, slow but sure, they got hotter and hotter and hotter. And their friends said, oh, they got really quiet. Or, oh, they said they didn't feel good, but they were still walking and they were still talking to me, so I thought they were okay. And that goes back to that mentation, right? Are they just grunting? Are they just acknowledging? Or are they talking to you? And that's why, as I mentioned way early in the discussion, I really like to if anybody doesn't look me in the eye and actually say hello, I like to engage them a little further and be like, how you doing? What's your name? Where are you from? And sometimes they're annoyed because I'm slowing them down and they need to stop their Garmin. But sometimes it's really important because they start to not mentate, and that's when you're going to see really severe problems really quickly with those folks.
You've served in some of the most iconic places in this country, the jewels of the national park system. What is it about the canyon? I think this is your second stint and your final stint before retirement. But what is it about the canyon that's so special to you?
It's hard to put your finger on. I think there's a reason there's 11 tribes that consider this place sacred. I think anybody who's run the length of the river can tell you. Like they may not be able to put a finger on it, but they'll tell you it was life-changing. There's something spiritual about this place. There is something that grabs hold of your heart. I will tell you, I came here after 10 years at Rocky Mountain, and I was excited to come, but at the same time, I was like, it took me a month or two. I remember thinking at one point, it all looks the same, which is a funny thought to me now, but that's what I remember that thought, like this moment of regret and missing Rocky and being like, this all looks the same. And then like, as I started to explore the side canyons and get on the river and really, so it took a while for the desert to grow on me, because I started out as a climbing ranger and mountaineering ranger in the Rockies. And then once it had a hold of me, it was like all done, right? Like there's nothing else. And I went to Yosemite for 5 years. I was at Big Bend. I was at the Smokies, and yeah, nothing got my heart like the canyon did. And so I think you just have to be here. It's very hard. I don't think I could put my finger on it. It is a special place that has a life of its own. And it's not always friendly, but if you're respectful of the place, I have found that it'll take care of you. Like, and I really don't know how to put my finger on that, but I think some of your listeners who've spent a lot of time here, they'll understand. That you have moments that you feel like, wow, I was really lucky, and that would be easy to say. Me, I tend to think, no, this place is looking out for me. Like it was a close call, and I'm okay because I've been respectful every time I've been here. So I think the folks who spend a lot of time here, they'll understand that.
Shade can save your life. That's why we invested in the Grand Canyon Shade Tracker, a completely free tool that lets you see when and where you'll have shade on your hike, no matter the trail, no matter the day, no matter the time. Plan your hike around maximizing your time in the shade and stay safe from the brutal canyon sun. The Grand Canyon Shade Tracker is brought to you free of charge by hiKin Grand Canyon, and you can find it at gcshadetracker.com. That's gcshadetracker.com. Go on, hunt that shade, and have a happier hike.
And you get to do so much as someone who's in charge of everything that happens below the rim. I mean, it's not just the corridor trails. There's a lot more to it than the corridor trails. You've got a raging river down there. You've got canyoneering that you have to do. I mean, how privileged do you feel to be able to do all those things, which I assume are things that you enjoy doing?
Oh, absolutely. Like when the opportunity came to help get our river patrol back on the water after a 10-year hiatus, I was absolutely like, sign me up. And, I was the chief ranger at the Smokies, and a lot of people thought my next move was going to be to Washington. And I was like, oh, no, this is where my heart is. This is where I want to make a difference at the end of my career. So yes, absolutely every minute that I get to spend in the canyon is a good day. We sometimes have challenging situations, but it sure beats my office. And I really, really just love being down in the canyon. And that gives me a chance here, Brian, because I know we're running out of time, but I really want to hit on something important to me. And that is that I think something the public takes for granted is the risk that the responders take in responding in the canyon. I would really love folks to understand, they think, oh, we'll just fly a helicopter down here and save me, right? And this is some of the most dangerous airspace in North America. There are 279 side canyons that are blowing winds in all directions. The weather can be excruciatingly different at Phantom than it is up on the rim. You can have sideways blowing 30-mile-an-hour winds up here, and it's calm at Phantom, or it can be a bright sunny day wherever you are on the river requesting assistance, and we've got a snowstorm with 10 feet of visibility. We can't even see the aircraft if it's like out of the hangar. We are inside the hangar, we can't even see it. And so I think that people need to understand that every time we lift that aircraft and come into the canyon, there's a lot of risk involved, and there's a pilot and a manager and a medic on that aircraft at a minimum, all of whom have families who love them. this is especially near and dear to my heart, as I'm very close to retiring, and sometimes my spouse is like, what are you doing getting on that thing still? You are so close. We take a lot of very, very well-trained, very, very excited to go and respond people, and we put them on that aircraft, and they are really good at what they do. But things happen, and helicopters fail. And I guess what I would like people to think about is, what would you tell the family of that flight crew if the only reason they were coming to get you is because you threw up your hands at tip-off and said, I just can't do anymore, right? And there's nothing really wrong medically. You're just tired, and you're not willing to spend the night and do the things we're asking you to do, to rest and get yourself out, right? If something happens to that crew, how would we, as SAR shift manager, talk to the family about that if there was nothing really that wrong? Like, you just wouldn't do what we were asking you to do, right? And I think that's where my heart just breaks at the thought of that. I have, unfortunately, I just went to Police Week, and I paid honor to the 8 names on the walls in the National Law Enforcement Memorial to friends I've lost across the agency over my career. People die doing these rescues. And I really wish people would think about that and do the things we're asking them to do, so that we don't put the crews in those positions. And then please be kind to the SAR shift ranger who's asking you to do those things, so we don't have to put the crews in those positions. Sometimes I'll be honest with you, it's really sad to see the response we get from folks when we tell them we're not going to just fly them out. They pitch a fit and they say, well, I have a Delta flight at 7 a.m. tomorrow. I have to be out. And I'm like, well, here's a phone. I'll help you change your reservation, but that's not what they want to hear. And we take a lot of abuse for that. And I think that's really unfortunate. But I wish people would understand that there's a lot of really solid rangers out there that put themselves at risk every time we respond. And it's what we love to do. It's why we do the job. But we'd like to think that folks are doing their best to mitigate their own situation before they call and put us at risk.
Last thing, Lisa, you're about to retire at a very young age, 52, and you've had a career that, could be considered a trailblazing kind of career. You've done a lot of amazing things. I know there's an entire legion of Rangers who looks up to you. So when you ultimately do look back, on your career years from now, what do you hope that your legacy will be?
Ooh, that's a good question. I think as you mentioned, this is going to be 31 years and getting to be on the sharp end for a lot of it. And I hope that legacy was that I was willing to share knowledge and teach, that I took really good care of my staff. I think that's really important to me, that the Rangers who actually worked for me know that I took really good care of them the very best I could. And that I put absolutely 100% in for 30 years. These places matter. They matter to the American public, and they sure as heck matter to us.
Well, on behalf of the Grand Canyon hiking community, I'll speak for our group and our listeners, and I just want to say thank you for your service. I think we use that term loosely sometimes, but the Ranger community truly serves the public, and I hope people understand that. These are people who have dedicated their lives to, like you said, protecting our national treasures, and it's a responsibility I know you take very seriously, and we all should just be full of gratitude that there are people willing to dedicate their lives to doing that, because it ultimately benefits all of us now and in future generations. So, Lisa, thank you so much for the time. It was an honor having you on the show, and I hope you come back, because, man, I've got this list of questions here, and there are a million other things that we could have gotten into. So I appreciate you being candid with your answers and the things that we talked about today. I hope you'll come back, but most of all, again, just thank you for all you've done, and we'll continue to do. It's a real honor.
Thank you, sir. It's been a privilege, and you better hustle up and schedule that, because you don't have much time left with me.
Lisa Hendy, who is retiring this year, but whose impact will be felt for a long time to come. Okay, here are the 3 big things I'll take away from that conversation. Number 1, self-rescue starts with self-responsibility. Lisa made it clear, no one is forced to hike in dangerous heat. If you're on South Kaibab at high noon in July, well, that's not an accident. That's a choice. The reality is the signs are everywhere, the warnings are clear, and yet people ignore them. So her message is you don't get to be surprised by the consequences when you've ignored every warning on the way down. Number 2, search and rescue is a sacred and dangerous duty. Every time a call comes in, someone's life might hang in the balance and someone else is risking theirs to help. What stuck with me most was Lisa's raw honesty about the pressure her teams are under. Multiple rescues, extreme heat, aerial evacuations, just tough calls. It's high-stakes work every single day, and it's being carried out by a small, elite group of people who care more than most hikers will ever realize. And finally, number 3, man, disrespecting rangers isn't just rude, it's outrageous. Here's the part that just lit a fire under me. Rangers are now dealing with verbal abuse from entitled visitors who don't like trail closures or aren't getting what they want, like helicopter or mule rides out. Lisa didn't rant about it. She didn't need to. You could hear the weariness in her voice. These are not mall cops, folks. These are career public servants who've earned every single bit of that uniform that they wear. I mean, come on. The least we can do is treat them with the respect and the gratitude that not only do they deserve, but they have earned. Okay, Coach Arnie time. And if you ever deal with plantar fasciitis or any other general foot discomfort, this one is for you.
Hey guys, this is Coach Arnie with another Grand Canyon tip of the week. And this one is about foot mobility, which is always a favorite topic of mine. Why? Because your feet are so important. It's your first point of contact with the trail. And what do I mean by foot mobility? It really involves ankle and foot. Let me quickly explain. If you spend too much time on your toes, you'll develop those strong, big calves, but potentially weak feet, leading to foot problems like plantar fasciitis. So how do we develop better foot mobility? First, by doing special exercises that help us develop that stiffness, which is strength in our ankles and feet, while also working on our foot and ankle mobility. It is possible, but we have to be intentional about it, because that strength and mobility in our foot and ankle allows you to keep more of our foot on the trail. And with more of your foot on the trail when we're hiking, pushing through the big toe, it allows us to rely more on our glutes, okay? Your glutes, for pushing ourselves up the trail, along with what's called the soleus. And that's the muscle between your upper part of your calf, known as the gastrocnemius, and the Achilles tendon. That soleus muscle, which I call the powerhouse of the lower leg, if you're using that muscle better, you're going to put less strain on your calves, less strain on your feet, and you're going to have more what I would call a happy feet, which allows you to have stronger and longer hikes on the trail, pain-free. Isn't that what we all want? Pain-free hiking, especially with our feet. Think about that. You can have that by just being intentional about having better mobility of your feet and ankles. I love you guys, and I'll talk to you later.
That's Coach Arnie Fonseca Jr. He's an exercise physiologist and canyon coach. His contact information, as always, is in the show notes. And hey, if you're in Phoenix this coming Saturday, you can meet Coach at an event my wife Zena is putting on at her Soul Collective Yoga and Wellness Studio in Cave Creek. It's called Solstice 25. It's basically a festival for the soul with all kinds of practitioners and healers doing their thing. If that kind of thing interests you, you can get tickets at soulcollective.love. That's soulcollective.love. It's a chance to hang out with Coach Arnie and Zena and take care of yourself. I'll probably be out there too, doing whatever I'm told. Oh, and Zena, by the way, has a hiking meditation podcast we're putting out pretty soon called Sacred Steps. So if that's your jam, you will love it. Stay tuned. Sacred Steps. It'll be a weekly podcast meant to give you a little meditation as you start your hike. All right, that's it for now. My name is Brian Special, encouraging you, as always, to go hike the canyon. Take that first step. Embrace the journey. And when you get there, whether it's for time goals or taking your time, just hike your own hike and enjoy every step in the majestic Grand Canyon. We'll see you next time on the Grand Canyon Hiker Dude Show, powered by hiKin. Hiking plus kinship, that's hiking. Together, we roam.